Israel has started flooding Hamas tunnel network with seawater. Thus the headline we pulled from the Messenger this week to post for our feeds for the Conversation Project. And this is a topic for this week's Story of the Week. In a week that had stories about Jonathan Majors running from his girlfriend, Tony Romo calling the wrong person someone the wrong wife, got kind of funny, and the Archwell Foundation finding out it made a whole lot less money this year. We're going to focus on a story that's going to get very complicated very quickly. And it's already been complicated since the whole thing started in October. Israel is going for a new tactic that's flooding the tunnels underneath Gaza that Hamas is living in, working under, and possibly holding as hostages with seawater, which is the problem for that third part, the hostages that may be down there and what will happen from there. This is a larger discussion on the larger discussion of what goes down in the region if Israel fails in their action or if Israel's actually successful beyond a point of actual return. You can find out more about the Conversation Project by going to our website. This is theconversationproject.com. We get these stories and get these ideas from you as we post news stories every 50 minutes or so on news feeds on Facebook and Twitter, formerly known as X, or X, formerly known as Twitter, where you can find us, see what we're doing, and you engage in the stories to tell us what stories are more popular, more conversational, if you will. Email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com and let me know what we can do about that. And as I said, go to our website. This is theconversationproject.com for more things to find out about the Conversation Project. Let's get into this topic because it's going to get really, really hectic, really, really crazy, really, really fast. Here's the underlying issue with the headline we posted. Israel has been at war, whether you want to call it an official war declared or not, with Hamas, not Palestine, not Gaza, with Hamas, a terrorist group that also has a political arm that's supposed to be running Gaza since October. The massive attack that happened on a very odd day to have it, or maybe the right day as it was a 10-year anniversary of an actual another attack, came out of nowhere, literally came out of nowhere. It had all sorts of reports of just strange activity, people coming over in gliders, people taken by land, by sea, by air, just all sorts of attacks. And of course, the very, very descriptive pictures and images and words, some of which had been collaborated, some we found weren't quite as bad, of various people, civilians types being kidnapped, babies being killed, all that stuff. Very bad stuff. Now, beyond the initial shock and awe of the initial attacks, we came to learn more about what was happening, and it was pretty much as bad as we thought. And on top of that, some topic we've talked a lot about on the Conversation Project and in the Story of the Week is how people are taking different sides. The Palestinian side, which is technically not the Hamas side, which is why it gets really awkward, and the Israeli side, where both sides have kind of issues, and it boils down to who gets to live where, why is there not a two-state solution, why can't we all get along, lots of things on those levels. Here's where this week's article, this week's headline is the issue. What we've had from the get-go is Israel wanting to destroy Hamas, destroy the terrorist organization, and rolling into Gaza, the very thin strip of land where the Palestinians essentially live, which is, for all practical purposes, run by and occupied by Israel, and sort of trying to strategically take out the Hamas terrorists, which is impossible because they're terrorists. Also impossible because they tend to hide behind various civilian places, hospitals, schools, things like that. All the things you suspect terrorists to do that you say is bad, that they do, that they say they don't do, that's what Hamas apparently tends to do. They also have a very, very dynamic system of tunnels under Gaza. That's how they move around the strip. That's how they get things back and forth. That's how they're able to get in and get out and do attacks wherever they're from. And that's where they suspect they're hiding the bulk of their last remaining hostages from the initial attacks. Somewhere over 150, somewhere between 150 to 200 hostages still remaining somewhere. And now, since no one knows where they are, it's hard to kind of go in there and rescue them. And since no one knows who they're hiding behind, it's hard to keep targeted attacks down to targets. And even though the Israelis have said, okay, peaceful people, civilians, just go south and we'll beat up the north and deal with that, as ridiculous as that is, it is. It happens. It is. And that's what's going on. Now, in the goal to basically destroy all remnants of Hamas, which, is essentially a wiping out of a people, a genocide by definition, which never works because someone always remembers. You have to wipe out every member of Hamas. And in the process of wiping out every member of Hamas, you've got to take in some collateral damage. Probably a lot more than you want to. 0 is your actual want, and 1 is really bad, but probably a lot more is going to happen. And in a case like here, where the Israelis, and more specifically, the guy who's running Israel right now, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is not really seen as a trusting sort, not really seen as a group that's good at getting things done right now and knows what they're doing. And in fact, there are rumors, innuendos, and actual news stories saying that the Israeli government, someone in the government, someone high up, someone in the war cabinet, had an idea that Hamas had this capacity, or at least had this plan out, but didn't have the exact tools to make it work. And so when it happened, timing may have been off, but they found out that they had capacity and the tools to make it work. So there's that. Of all the folks who have the 9/11 sort of conspiracy theory that we knew it was coming and we wanted it to happen for some reason, essentially to go attack the folks in the Middle East and take their oil, or the people who believe that we knew that Pearl Harbor was happening and then we wanted it to happen, so we had an excuse to go into World War II. This is right up your alley. Let's ignore that for a moment. Let's go to the basics part of what's happening. Israel's fighting a battle with a group. Not necessarily an actual army because they're not a declared nation, but Israel's battling with a group that is hard to detect because apparently they're also taking off their coverings, taking off their markings, showing that they're running around in civilians and making it hard to tackle that issue. But they know, the Israelis, they know they have a great system of tunnels under Gaza. So they're using a trick that was used in Egypt many years ago when they were battling terrorists there that had big tunnel issues. They're flooding the tunnels with water, seawater, because you can't survive with seawater. But there's a problem with that. The biggest problem is you don't know exactly who's down there, and the hostages from the what you can call a ceasefire a few weeks ago that stopped being released, and the hostages apparently are trying to escape and being shot by the Israelis. A whole nother issue that is not taken into account for this podcast, so we're not going to go to the here. We don't know where they are. And the best place to hide them, have them, keep them so no one can find them is somewhere underground in the tunnels. Now, the rumors have it they're being moved around to various spaces. They're being taken care of and then moved to other places. While they're swapping out places that they're supposed to be safe havens for the actual hostages, to moving out and swapping out with places for command center things and tanks and their weapons to make it safe. They say, oh, we're housing people here that are safe, and then they move them out and move them someplace else and move the tanks there so you don't think you're going to attack. That's why there's so many hospitals and schools and things that they know tunnel systems work through, that the Israelis keep saying, oh no, there's actually command center pieces down there. And while this sounds like something the Mongols will throw out there, a big Napoleon sort of actor is like, we're going to just take this thing out. We don't do war that way anymore. We don't do peopling that way anymore. We don't do this stuff anymore. So the mass tactics of just blowing everybody away is something we don't do. Targeting may not be perfect, but trying to be more exact, having the intelligence to know who you're attacking, how they're being attacked, and what will happen in the aftermath, eliminating as much collateral damage as possible, is the key to wars these days. That's why so many warriors here in the States are sitting in chairs and air conditioned rooms, flying drones and attacking people one-on-one. It doesn't seem fair, but when you have the technology, you have the upper hand, and so you don't have to be so fair. Tis what tis. The bigger issue for the region comes down to the millennial-old issue of who the Israelis are and why they are where they are. The traditional Holy Lands, if you will, that basically everybody claims a piece of, is essentially where the Israelites, the original Israelites, like the old school ones hanging out with Jesus, are from. Pulled away from their land from various reasons, slavery and nomadicness and all these things. And then just as a people, as a group, having no place as a homeland, a place to go. Yes, Jews, people who were Jewish descent populated many other nations, many other places. And yes, that became a fairly, very big issue during World War II, one of the reasons why it happened, does not excuse the fact that the Israelis, those folks, did not have a place to go. So some treaties were made, some deals were done, and they made some land, and poof, they went back to Jerusalem, back to the Holy Land, back to original lands. Literally, people have been fighting over this land literally for crusades because they believe they have a rights to it because Jesus Christ. And when, the actual Jews were like, we're here first, regardless. So what we have right now is a land grab, or a battle over a land grab. That's an unofficial land grab, or more or less an equivocal land treaty that other people cut up and put people there. In the process, people of the Palestinian persuasion, people of Palestinian descent, got squeezed. They have claims to the land themselves. They have claims to the place as a place of holiness, a place of origin as well. And so what we have is a group of people who should just say, hey, we can do this. Let's get along. Let's have a two-state solution, which is technically not two states, but two different mindsets. It's a lot like if Cowboys fans and Falcons fans decided they're going to move to Mississippi and just sort of figure out how to live there. I'm not sure how that would work, but it exists. It's a possibility. It could happen. But it's not going to happen because Cowboys fans and Falcons fans just can't figure out how to make it work. So they're going to try to occupy the same place, but one team gets the heads up. Let's say it's the Falcons because someone writes a treaty because Falcons fans lose more than Cowboys fans to give them more land, give them more control. And then Cowboys fans are kind of left dealing with whatever. They vote in some pseudo government, somebody that played for the Bengals, I guess, who can come up with something to kind of get things going. And because they actually aren't as good at, making up plays and coaching as well as they are, some other past Bengals come up and decide, we're just going to, beat up the Falcons fans and run them away from the big bass of land, even though they control most of it. And the Falcons actually pump in our food and our medicine and our power and our internet and control everything. As sort of wild as that little rundown scenario is, that's a very dumbed down version of what the scenario is right there. Israel controls the land. They control the power. They control the internet. They control the resources for a small strip of land that is lived in, that is inhabited by people of Palestinian descent. And it's not great land. And it's not great conditions. It pretty much sucks to live there. And so if someone decide, hey, let's do nicer by these folks, we can get along better. But they have territory that's in dispute, so we don't want to give them that territory back. So that's that. And they have governments that's sort of antagonistic to anybody, and they literally are run by terrorists. So let's not talk to them to try to get them to consider getting rid of the terrorist guys and having a joint government and doing better. Let's not even think about a joint government because these folks are not our people. They literally are not us. They're the others, and they should live in this little strip of land all packed together and just suffer because that's what they are. That's who they are. It doesn't matter. For a nation, for a people that is surrounded by other nations and other peoples who just want to see them all die, that being Israel and many of the other nations in the Middle East, mostly because they're Muslim and there's the old standing whatever hatred for them. Although essentially we're all supposedly preaching from the same book at some point in time. At some point in time, the same guy sort of wrote the thing, and we just had splinters from things. It's just not working out. It's not going to happen. Let's focus on the seawater thing for just a moment. Pumping water from the sea into tunnels to flood out, flush out, kill people of the enemies is, sounds like a fairly good tactic. Sounds like something you would see some sort of group of the empire try to flood out some sort of rebel group, which is partially why you're getting the issue. What you're seeing with the overpowering aggressors, not saying that because they're overpowering aggressors, but that's what they're being seen as in Israelis, is that people wondering why these poor Palestinians are living in squalor and living in these conditions. And why must they do this? The Israelis must be the big bad bullies. The same way people see the U.S. as big bad bullies when they go into places and kind of bully around in many cases, just sort of saying, hey, might is right and we have it, so follow along. In many cases, those nations, those places want to be bullied because along with the weapons, along with the swagger, we're bringing a bunch of cash. Some of them don't want to be bullied as much anymore because they want to be seen as big and tough, whatever, but they still kind of want the cash, so they'll play along with it to a point. And in some cases, yes, there is backlash, and there's reasons why many Americans are finding themselves in military positions having harder times to be moving forward or having forward bases, because some of our former allies we've kind of gotten tips with, and some of our former allies are now merging with other folks who we're not so happy with, not so great with, so there's that. Flooding the tunnels of Hamas sounds like a great plan. It would weaken the Hamas stature. It would show that we, by surrogate, the Israelis and our coalition, have the ideas, have the capacity to stop a group from doing more damage. Problem number one, they're probably hiding the hostages in the tunnels, so that would be a problem. Problem number two is the overall goal of Israel, and as spoken by Benjamin Netanyahu, to eliminate Hamas completely, to the man. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. The ideal will never die. Someone will want to take up the mantle, and somebody will hate the Israelis anyway and use them as excuse. Another issue is the man who's saying these words more publicly as a leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, which, if you follow American politics and realize that there's two guys who are going to be our next leader who most of the nation don't want to vote for, yet because the way the system works, they're the main two people that our nation will have to vote for. The system of government, the prime minister system, the parliamentary system that happens for coalitions there for the Israelis, found a way to put into power, again, Benjamin Netanyahu, which is not the issue that he's been overly in power many, many times. It's the fact that he's also under investigation and under trial, I think, right now for corruption, and that the people who are in the nation don't particularly like him. They didn't get a vote. It's parliamentary procedure, so it just sort of happened. But he's the guy in charge, and the lay people don't really particularly care for him. Yet he's the one that's supposed to save them and protect them when he's already proven he didn't do a great job on the get-go. Will Israel flood the tunnels? Will they flood the area? Will they sweep through Gaza house by house, store by store, land by land, and get rid of every single terrorist one by one in just a slow slog of a conflict? Probably not. In fact, because they're losing the backing of a lot of people, the United States is getting a little bit frustrated, wanting them to, back away from some of this stuff and kind of give about 5 weeks to figure out what's going to go on, even if it's the conflict's not done, not be so heavy-handed on things. We see this in Ukraine, where right now the United States is having issues figuring out how to fund their offerings to Ukraine against Russia. And the EU actually yesterday or 2 days ago, one nation voted not to fund their efforts towards Ukraine, when we're also seeing reports that the Russians are basically at their worst and essentially ready to give up and have no resources to pull it together. But we, the collective U.S. and collective Europeans and whatever, don't want to put in the final bits of pennies so they can, put the crushing blow on Russia, or at least hold it up long enough so that Russia will find some way to actually pull away. Israel's the same way. They're not going to win this without us, U.S., and whatever allies they have. And essentially, it's U.S. or bust for Israel. Heavy-handed tactics, I honestly, in an all-out war, in an all-out conflict battle, if we know where things are going, the intelligence tells us that this is where the terrorists are, this is where we'll get them, and we can do our best to eliminate collateral damage, then call me a hawk, because that's the only way you're going to get rid of the get-rid-ofs. But the biggest issue with this one is we don't know. And do we actually trust Israel and the messaging right now? As the father of an 11-year-old, I know for a fact that I'm about 60% sure that 80% of what my daughter's saying is a bit fabricated. Not necessarily a lie, not necessarily to mislead, but for whatever reason, not exactly the truth for whatever reason. So when we're backing up a group who is claiming their job right now is to kill every last man in an organization because every man in an organization is trying to kill them, we have to be careful. We need to support Israel because they should be supported. We also need to make sure that the Israeli peoples, governments, groupings, whatever, can figure out their own problems and learn how to live and let live, if you will, even in those situations. It's a hard, harsh thing to say. And as I say often, my military service and experience doesn't put me in line to be one of the generals talking on TV, by all means. But as a lay student of military and military tactics since I was 14, 15, since a student of history and a fan of history things for all my life, and as a person with eyes that can observe the articles and the news clippings I'm seeing and can determine for myself how the slant is going and how I want to take it in, I can see what I see. I can determine what I can determine. I can say I know what I know, and I'm being brave enough to speak the words and put them into digital form, recording, so that other people can judge them. Feel free to judge. Feel free to tell me what you think. Feel free to agree or disagree. But be ready to actually make a point, sign your name to it, and try to stick by it if you're proven wrong. I will see what happens if I'm proven wrong, and we'll talk about it if you are proven wrong as well. That's been the story of the week for the week ending December the 12th, 2023. Thank you so much for being a part of what we do at the Conversation Project. Every 50 minutes, we're posting news stories, articles from all over, various sources. Some you'll probably hate more than others, but we're looking for different headlines, different sources, different things to get conversational news topics from you. So check out the feeds on Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter, facebook.com/This Is the Conversation Project, and twitter.com, x.com/th_conversation. Go to our website, thisistheconversationproject.com, and find more links to where you can find us all over the place in audios, in videos, in written forms, and in the short video forms we do all day long. Visit our sponsorships page and our partnerships page and find ways to help support the effort to keep things going at here for the Conversation Project. Email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com, totally free, and let us know what we can do going forward. And as I say at the end of every single piece of media I do, long form at least, stay limber, stay hydrated, stay on task. The purpose of that is to remind you that life is a long slog journey, and you want to do the best to make sure you are up to task to make your way through it. Don't try to prematurely wrap your stuff up. With that, we're wrapping up this podcast for this week. Thank you for being a part of the family, and we'll see what stories your engagement let us know. Will it be the top 10 stories for the week next week, and which one of those stories we will pluck out to discuss, go deeper into as a story of the week.